All right, so back in November 2023, I launched this podcast with big hopes, a lot of nerves, but mainly a ton of good energy. But then I look back and it's been like 6 months that I recorded my last episode. And I pretty much went completely quiet. And I didn't just stop posting. I had hit a wall. On top of that, my other business ventures weren't growing like I had expected them to, which led to my confidence taking an even bigger hit. And I found myself just questioning almost everything that I was doing. So, with that said, I just want to say that if you've ever hit pause on something that you love, whether it's a dream, a side hustle, or even your own health, and wondered if it means that you failed, then this one's for you. And in this comeback episode, if you want to call it that, I'm going to walk you through the different parts of this break that I took. I'm gonna be completely transparent about, what pulled me away, the stuff that I learned because of this, why I'm going back to part-time work, and how this pivot actually gave me more clarity than I've had in a very long time. So what I've done is I've broken this episode up into about 5 short sections, and in each section I'll also share a simple strategy, or better yet, like a takeaway that helped me move through that part of the journey, with the hope that you may be able to use it if you're in a similar space or find yourself in a similar situation. And so whether you find yourself restarting something, shifting priorities, or just trying to figure out what's next, I hope what I'm about to share gives you something to hold on to. And just in case you're new here, this is the Body of Work podcast. I'm Andy. I'm a part-time dadpreneur trying to figure out how to build something meaningful, how to stay fit, how to show up fully for my family and become the best version, not only for them but also for me. And this podcast, the Body of Work podcast, is my way of documenting that journey, not from the finish line, but from the messy middle. So I think it's only right that I start with what pulled me away. You see, back in 2023, I made a decision to get more serious about creating content online because I really started to understand the importance of building a personal brand and just having a presence online. We're in a time now where like having a business and making content isn't just something reserved for influencers or celebrities anymore. It's not optional. It's becoming a vital part of any business if you think about it. And when I say content, I mean making videos, recording audios, showing up, sharing your thoughts in a written form, that kind of stuff. So I started posting online more seriously, and toward the end of 2023, I had this kind of wild idea at the time to start a podcast. And the goal was simple. I wanted to document my journey, the ups, the downs of entrepreneurship, building online, and just figuring out this creator space altogether. And it actually started off quite well. I had a solid run of consistent solo episodes. And now that I think back on it, I remember making this promise to myself that I wasn't going to invite any guests onto the podcast until I had personally recorded 10 solo episodes. And that was my rule I set for myself because I didn't want to rush into interviews just because that's what most people were doing. I wanted to prove to myself that I could hold space on the mic and that I could actually share things that mattered. So that's what I did. I took my time. I recorded when I felt energized. I didn't force it. I didn't want to burn out early or burn out early by turning it into this pressure-filled thing. And then eventually I started having some really, really good conversations with other creators once I had hit those 10 episodes. And I loved it. The podcast really felt like home. But then about 7 to 8 months after starting the podcast, things shifted. And I wouldn't say it was life that shifted, but it was more like my focus did. Because around that same time, so about 7 months after starting the podcast, I had also started a community to help creators who were struggling showing up on camera. And that's something that I've been through. And I really wanted to just help other people build that confidence. But somewhere along the way, I started drifting. My focus shifted from helping creators build camera confidence to helping them build communities and then to monetize those communities. And now I'm not saying that monetizing or trying to monetize is something wrong or bad or whatever the case is. But in the process, I lost the essence of what I was doing. And because things started to get unclear and, the water was mucky, I slowly eased off of the podcast and then eventually I eased off of the community too. And when I look back now, I realized something. It wasn't that I lost passion for the podcast. It wasn't that I stopped enjoying it. What really happened is my priorities got scrambled. They were all over the place. I got distracted and I basically lost direction. So here's the takeaway that I want to leave with you from this section. It's that it's okay to pause and actually naming the break, owning what it was, helps you process it and return intentionally, right? For me, naming the break, it helped me come to terms with it. And it gave me space to say, okay, I hit a wall, my focus drifted, things didn't go as planned, and that's okay. It gave me permission to have compassion for myself, something that I lacked a lot early on. So if you're listening and you've hit pause on something that you care about, then please hear me out. You're not broken, you're not weak, you're human. And sometimes the most powerful thing that you can do is give that pause a name, sit with it, and then, when you're ready, you come back with intention. And that's where I am now. I'm coming back, but, differently. Now, I want to talk about the hardest part that I've basically had to deal with. And it's something, or at least it's not something that I fully accepted up until, very recently, to be completely honest. It's the whole idea of having to go back to work, part time. Because back in 2023, when I started taking content seriously, I also started building a web design business on the side, and that was going pretty well. Then about halfway through the year, I made a decision, probably one of the boldest decisions I've had to make in my adult life, which was to quit my job to take on entrepreneurship. And I wanted to take on all of it, right? The excitement, the unknowns, the hopes, the pressure. I had said yes to everything. And that year, honestly, a lot was going on internally with me and externally. And I saw success, with the web design side of things, especially early on, because most of it came from warm leads, people I had already know and I had some kind of connection with. I was also putting out more content, for the business and trying to learn how to attract colder leads online. And I was new to all of it, like really new. So I did what I could. I was posting on social, reaching out, even making, the cold calls. But I slowly started noticing it was getting harder and harder to bring in clients, and that momentum wasn't there anymore. And that started getting to me. And at the same time, again, like I found myself leaning more and more into the direction of making content because I loved it. Don't get me wrong. I also enjoyed, building websites and helping business owners, but content just lit something up inside of me because it gave me a lot of energy. So naturally, my focus started shifting again. And as I shared earlier, that shift eventually led me to starting the podcast, building the community, and trying to build something more long term and something that was more personal. But here's the reality, right? I quit my job and I went full time into business, and it didn't unfold the way that I expected it to. And that was really hard to admit because I really believe this was my shot. Like this was my moment, my time to build something great, right? To prove that I could do it, to show up for my family in a new way, and most of all, to be successful on my own terms. So to now be in a position where I'm looking to go back to work, even though it's part-time, like it's tough. It's tough not to see that as a failure. And that's where my head went at first. It felt like all the energy, all the time, all the things that I had been trying to build just didn't add up to much. And I carried a lot of shame with that. Like, I'll be completely honest. Like, I didn't want to talk much about what I was doing. I felt like I was all over the place and nowhere at the same time. Like, I had poured so much into something and I still wasn't living up to the potential I believed I had. But then something shifted, and, credit here goes to my wife. We had a really good, honest conversation, and I opened up about how I was feeling, right? And she said something that basically reframed everything for me. She told me, Andy, like, you didn't fail. You did something most people are, too scared to even try, and it didn't go the way you planned. Yeah, whatever. But it doesn't mean going back to work means that you're a failure. She said, you ran an experiment basically. And now you got data, and now what you're doing is you're pivoting. And when she said that, Like it really hit home. It landed for me because it made me realize this isn't the end of, my dream. This is just a necessary adjustment that needs to be made because I'm still committed to entrepreneurship, still committed to building. But now I'm just bringing some more stability back into my life. And honestly, going back to work part-time isn't just going to help me, with the finances, but also with how I feel on a day-to-day basis, that sense of contribution, that the rhythm, it brings some order back. And I know it'll actually give me some more space as well to give creatively too. So if you're in a similar spot, right, where you're thinking about going back to work or you're already back, I just want to leave you with this. See this as a necessary pivot. And I want you to remember that pivoting isn't quitting, right? See it for what it really is, which is that it's like a strategic adjustment to keep your dream alive with a bit more stability. Because you're not the first entrepreneur to go through it, and trust me, you won't be the last. And the truth is, sometimes the most powerful things that you can do for your dream is to support it with a bit more structure, a bit more foundation, so that you can breathe, so that you can plan and keep things going. All right, but a lot has changed during that time, right? Like back in 2024, oh no, back in January of this year, actually, I made a decision to take my health and my fitness a bit more seriously. Like I was already consistent. I was doing kettlebell workouts, training at home, but I felt like something was still missing. I think part of it was that I could feel my confidence, slowly slipping. Not necessarily from the fitness itself, but because of everything that I've been going through in my entrepreneurial journey. And I knew I needed something to help build that back up, build up that confidence, physically as well as mentally. So yeah, I was already doing the high intensity kettlebell workouts, really functional stuff. And in the past, I used to play a lot of basketball, which gave me solid conditioning without even really thinking much about it. But I hadn't played ball in a while, and I could feel it. And I wanted to push myself again. I wanted to build back that conditioning, and not just the physical kind, but the kind that sharpens your mind too. So I told myself that I'd pick up running again. And that's exactly what I did. Just once a week, I decided this is going to be the agreement I'm going to make with myself. Now, I've never really considered myself to be a runner, especially not long distance. And I think that came from years of mostly, focusing on weight training and basketball. Like 5 kilometers, for example, was always the ceiling in my head. But irregardless, I started anyway. No expectations, no fancy goals, just once a week, run 5K, hit it out of the park. And I stuck with it for a while, for some months actually. Then a friend of mine mentioned how he, signs up for races because it gives him a sense of accountability and something to actually train toward. And I thought, that's actually kind of cool. And then I had this thought, what if my kids could see me train toward something? Because that was one of the things that I loved about basketball, being able to model discipline and passion, for something, but with life and time constraints and everything else, I never really got to show them that side of me the way that I wanted to. And so running kind of gave me that new shot again to do so. And it was something I could train for, show consistency with, discipline, and invite them, on race day to come and check out Papa, right? So what I did was I signed up for a 10K race. Yeah, 10K. Even though 5K was my limit, I signed up for something twice as far. And I gave myself about 4 to 5 weeks to train for it. So I put a plan together. And before I knew it, I ran my first 10K this year. Then 2 months later, or at least then I signed up for another event 2 months later after that first race. And I ran that one too, and it went extremely well. I'll probably share more on that in another episode. And something amazing happened, right? That belief that I'm not a long distance runner, it broke. It shattered. Like I shattered it because I realized that all I needed was to put in the reps, the right plan, some consistency, and a little belief in myself. And that belief, it wasn't just a switch I flipped. it grew every time I pushed through what I thought I couldn't do. And that shift gave me so much momentum. And during that same time, I picked up something else, something I never imagined that I'd be into. And it's furniture flipping, right? And the backstory is this very quickly. If I looked at the last 2 years of my life, I spent almost all of it behind my desk in my office, staring at a screen. And I started craving something different, something hands on this time, something that would still allow me to be creative, where I could make something, not maybe from scratch, but, from scrap. And furniture flipping, it really gave me that outlet. Taking old pieces, sanding them down, repairing them, restoring them. It felt like therapy. And it was something I could do with my hands outside the screen that still lit up the creative part of me. And it became a way to tap back into making, to let myself flow, to see progress in front of me. And that led to another decision, which is this. I wanted to recommit to YouTube. No more spreading myself across Instagram, TikTok, and every other platform. Just focus on one. Go deep, not wide. Because I believe there's power in long form content, especially like in telling a story with space to, let the listener breathe and just and follow along. And I mean, short form is cool, but it's a different game, different energy. And right now, YouTube feels like the right playground for where I'm at. So I'm in the middle of testing that out right now. And that's where I'm placing my focus. And if there's one takeaway I want you to leave with from all of this that I just shared with you, it's this. It's to just start where you are. It may sound cliche, but where you are may not feel perfect, and it probably never will, to be completely honest, but it's enough. And whatever it is that you're working toward, whatever craft or capacity you want to build, like start with the small reps. Start with small, consistent steps, one at a time. And, let the joy of what you're partaking in, like let that lead. Keep it simple and give the energy you can, even if it's not 100%, because that's usually all you need to, to build that momentum again. And somewhere in that space, in the midst of everything that's been going on, I found clarity. Clarity on who I feel I'm really creating for, and honestly, who I've always been trying to create for, even if I couldn't fully articulate it before. You see, when I started making content back in 2023, I was trying to speak to everyone. Even when I was doing web design, I wanted to reach everyone. When I started my community, I wanted to help anyone who wanted to get better at speaking on camera. And don't get me wrong, right? The intention was good. Intention is always good. But there's that saying that says, if you try to speak to everyone, you end up speaking to no one, because it's just too broad. It's too general. It doesn't cut deep by the person. And through all of this, the running, the flipping, the content creation, the falling off, the returning, I realized something. I was never trying to talk to everyone. The person that I've been trying to talk to is someone just like me. I'm creating for the dad, the man who's had entrepreneur ambitions for maybe 10 years or even longer, but never had the right guidance to turn those ambitions into something, solid. He's got a couple of kids. He wants to be the best father, the best husband that he can be. And he's honest enough to admit that he hasn't always shown up the best way that he wanted to, or the way that he wanted to. He's realizing there are gaps in how he reacts, in how he leads, and how he takes care of himself. And now he's on this mission to become a better man. Not perfect, just better. I'm talking to the dad who is a multi-passionate. He's genuinely curious about many things. And because he wants to explore so many things, build different skills, and maybe even start something on the side, it sometimes drives him crazy, completely nuts, not because he's flaky, but because he genuinely loves learning and he loves creating. And yeah, it can look like shiny object syndrome, but underneath that is real curiosity and a hunger even. And He's trying to channel all of that into something focused, something meaningful. And then there's the inner work, right? He doesn't fully know what it looks like yet, but he knows it's something that needs to happen, deep within. He notices triggers, or he's noticed triggers in himself that he doesn't understand. And maybe he's more impatient than he wants to be. Maybe he shuts down instead of speaking up. Maybe he feels things deeply but doesn't know how to process it or express any of it and just be transparent. And now his identity is being challenged by who he is right now and who he knows he's capable of becoming. That's the man that I want to speak to. That's the man that I want to talk to. And that's the person that I'm doing this for and I want to show up for. And if that's you, I just want to leave you with this. When you're building something, anything, the best person you can speak to is the person you used to be. Maybe it's who you were 5 years ago. Maybe it's who you were last week. And maybe, just maybe, it's also the person you're still becoming. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have it all figured out because none of us do. And when you create from that place, from a place of honesty, of progress in motion, you keep your content aligned, you keep your message feeling real. You're not performing, you're showing up. And that's what draws the right people to you. It's not polished perfection, but it's, presence in the process. So yeah, I'm speaking from the middle, the messy middle. But I've always made it through enough of the chaos to basically say, if you're somewhere in the middle too, then you're my person, like you're my people. And if anything I say helps shift your life, your mindset, or your momentum, even in the smallest way, or maybe even in a big way, then that's exactly why I'm here. All right, so here's where I'm going from here. Because now you know where I've been, what I've been up to. And now I want to share where I'm heading next, what my plans are. Because I've been away from the mic for far too long. And this space is something that's brought me a lot of joy. Not just because I get to speak, but because I get to express, what I'm feeling. I get to share, I get to teach through what I've been through. And I hope that by doing that, it helps someone else make a shift and whatever that shift looks like for them. So yeah, I'm back on the mic here on the Body of Work podcast, but I'm coming back with a different focus because the goal now is to create from a space of peace and not pressure. Now, consistency, that's still something I need to figure out because I'm not trying to force myself into a rigid weekly posting schedule just to say, hey, look at me, I'm consistent. I think there's good pressure, sometimes, but with everything that I've got going on, going back to work part-time, the kids, family life, and the other, creative projects that I'm involved in, it has to make sense. It has to be sustainable. And that's why I keep coming back to this idea of, having, peace over like full on pressure. Because I want to be consistent, but I want to enjoy, being consistent, not feel trapped by it. And I'm not trying to be everywhere anymore. The focus for me is longer form content, which is in the form of this podcast, which you may be consuming either on YouTube, maybe on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, but also, long form through documenting what I'm doing with my furniture flipping. Even if I'm new to the craft and I don't know what I'm doing half of the time, that's the focus, for now at least. And that's the beauty of it, right? Being a beginner or not being afraid to be a beginner again, not being afraid to suck at something, letting yourself be new and not having to perform, just showing the process. Because if you're 37 years old plus, in your 40s, thinking about picking up a new hobby or learning a new skill, you don't have to feel like you need to get it right from day one because that's not real. And it's not the point either. So whether you're watching this again either on YouTube or you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever, just know that my goal is to show up here from now on, to show up, consistently once I figure out how that will look, and to create content that reflects the real process, not the highlight reel. Yeah, not the highlight reel, right? And if I can leave you with anything from this episode, anything at all, it's this. It's that you don't need a massive plan. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to take the first step. Because if you can see the first step, that's a step that you need to take. Don't get caught up in, thinking about step 97 when you haven't even taken the one that's in front of you. So take that first step, right? Show up. Show up with as much clarity as you've got today, even if it's not much. Stay as committed as you can, even if it's just a little, because that's more than enough to start building new momentum or to rebuild the momentum that you thought that you had lost. And if this hit home for you, like, share it with another dad, who needs to know that he's not failing just because the path changed. Let's stop pretending we've got it all together, because starting again isn't failure. It's actually proof that you're still in the fight.